I think it's great because it's bringing more people to the games, and it's creating more education about the different backgrounds of people, ongoing traumatic impacts of that, and what we can do to try and build a better nation until there's some stuff going on inside their head the minute they walk through the door. So I'm not going to absolutely smash and bash and demand that kid.
Hello, welcome to the Kennel NRL Podcast. Today we have a special guest on, but before we do that, can I get you please to like and subscribe to our channel, like this video, it helps boost us up. We've got so much content coming up and we're preparing for season 2024. I'd like to welcome Dibbo. Welcome, Dibbo.
Oh, it's good to be back, It's been quite the layoff, but yeah.
There's a lot happening in the background, and our guest is Joe Williams.
Pleasure, lads. It's we've been trying to tee this up for a little bit, so it's good to get on and connect, and we a couple of different mutual contacts that we know, so it's always good, and it's always good to be back yarning with some of the Bulldogs family, mate. I know that my background's blurred because my son's got Parramatta Eels gear all over his bed, so don't hold that against me.
Go the Eels.
If I knew your son was a Parramatta supporter, I might have second guessed the interview. No, I'm kidding.
Go the Eels. Sorry, he chose the right side.
Thank you so much for taking the time this afternoon, Joe. We've tried, but this is probably about the 17th time we tried to get it connecting. Had a few technical issues, but Joe's a patient man. So thanks once again, Joe. I guess I'd like to start sort of by asking you a little bit about rugby league. First and foremost, who do you currently support as a team in the rugby league?
I'll shoot from the hip. I spent most of my time at the Rabbits, so I'm pretty staunch. With the Rabbits. A couple of my, at least a couple of my kids actually. They love the Rabbits. My oldest boy, my daughter, my oldest daughter, and then my youngest boy who lives here with me now. He's this sort of kid that cries when they lose and things like that. So, but my other little son, he supports Para, and he's absolutely staunch with Para. And my youngest daughter, so I got 5 kids. My youngest daughter, she just supports whoever my middle boy supports. So. She's Para this week. We'll see who she is next week when the season rolls around again next year.
Wow, so you yourself, you're still a Rabbitohs man. Still runs deep.
Yeah, I've done a little bit of work with the Rabbits over the years. I guess I did actually this season. I did some on ground emceeing and stuff like that with their Indigenous round, which was a cool. I guess it was a cool. Opportunity, but experience as well, just to, I guess, be back out there and introducing the players before the game. The hype man. You got to get the crowd going. So it was one of those things, and it was a pretty cool special actually, because they highlighted a lot of Indigenous sports stars from across the South Sydney region. So it was cool to be out there that night, and it was a really good night.
Joe, do you find, I don't know, I notice probably South Sydney resonates the most with the Indigenous community. Do you find that South Sydney Rabbitohs do more towards the Indigenous community, like as in they probably invest more of their time and efforts? Is that probably why they're the most followed amongst the Indigenous community?
I think historically, there's a big Aboriginal population, obviously in Redfern, and then out in La Perouse as well. But right throughout the South Sydney district, there's a highly populated Aboriginal area. So there's connections there, and Aboriginal people. We've been grassroots people, and I guess if South is in your first team, they're the second team. So what I have noticed as well is that the NRL. They're doing a hell of a lot better now than they ever have. And I think it's obviously, sport's a product of the country. The country's, whilst, a couple of, a month or so ago, as far as the referendum was a big disappointment for a large part of the community. It's good to see that there is more trying to be done. Whilst I don't think it's not perfect. And, we always strive for strive for perfection, but things are getting better.
You mentioned a couple of things that I'd love to sort of just dive into a little bit. Firstly, Indigenous round. I want to ask, what do you think of Indigenous round? Do you think that it's, and as you say, the NRL is getting better. I think that the NRL has a lot to improve, but it really is sort of starting to put its money where its mouth is in certain issues. So what do you think of Indigenous round? And then also, I guess, as an extension of that, what do you think of multicultural round? Because last year's, or 2023 multicultural round, I saw it more representative of each person's background compared to years before. I think they really highlighted that. A lot of the clubs went out of their way to highlight their players' sort of ethnicity, and I thought that was wonderful. So what are your thoughts on Indigenous round and also sort of by extension the multicultural round?
Again, I think it's getting better. I don't think it's where it needs to be, but I think it's getting better. And it just comes with further education and further awareness and people in the right places to be able to make the decisions to be able to have those things right. So, there's more representation now of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people within, I guess, the head office of say the NRL and stuff like that. There's specific programs and stuff like that. And then there's we need to, I guess, the game is highly populated by the Pacific nations now within the NRL. So I definitely think that Australia is a multicultural place, and sport is a byproduct of that, right? So we're seeing more people from more nations and backgrounds, which I think is fantastic. I think it's great because it's it's bringing more people to the games, and it's creating more education about the different backgrounds of people. I reflect on I'm someone who always tries to learn. And I reflect on just recently I stayed in a small town hotel in a small town, a motel, sorry, and it was an Indian a Sikh family that ran the hotel. I ran the motel, sorry, and it was their local. It was their celebration, their yearly celebration. Diwali, is it the Diwali celebration? So they sat there, and I sat there and wanted to learn. So I think when we're talking about a multicultural country, as I always talk about, the NRL or sport is just a workplace, and whilst we love it and we live and breathe it, don't get me wrong, but it is a workplace, and we need to be respectful of the different backgrounds, different religions and things like that for the different people who represent within those codes.
So you mentioned something I think is really, really important about finally recognizing and identifying the players that come from sort of Pacifica background and how large of a contingent they make up. I think it's excellent, especially with the Pacific Championship that we had, to really start to hone in on these players. And the thing is, they have great connection with their culture. It's not like they've come over here and sort of forgotten sort of their culture. You see when they win, they wear these, the cultural sort of those necklaces made of chocolate and lollies, and just seeing that, man, it's like, it's so great because you see like our country empowering some of these people that have made Australia their home and playing. And as you say, like rugby league and sport is always an extension of the culture that exists in the country. And that's what I love, focusing on, number one, the Indigenous. I love Indigenous round. I think that
it's my favourite round.
Honestly, the Indigenous jerseys are just incredible. Like they're my favourite jerseys. And beyond the aesthetics of it, to recognise the place of Indigenous people in Australia, a lot of people say, keep politics out of sport. But the world doesn't work that way. You don't just apoliticise things because you don't want to talk about a particular subject, right? Politics and sport are intrinsically linked. Like you look at, for example, now the government wanting to put in $600 million to fund a PNG team. I have no problem with that. But how do you take politics out of sport when the government is looking to fund a team for $600 million? Like
something behind that.
Yeah, of course there is. You can't
give us your resources.
You can't apoliticize it. And so when I see Indigenous players being proud of their culture, not being afraid to speak their minds, I think that especially in rugby league and the support that they've seen, I think it's fantastic. And like one of the things that I find really disturbing sometimes is when some of the Indigenous players say we don't want to sing the national anthem, right? And
I've never been connected to that national anthem.
But regardless of whether
Even
you
as
are,
a
but
kid.
as Indigenous people, or as anyone, you could be anyone. I could be 11 and say, you know what, I don't want to sing the Australian anthem, and the media wants to target them, and I just, it doesn't really like the dots don't connect. Like, why are you honing in on this? Like, these people, there's a culture, a 60,000 year connection to this culture. This anthem's 30 years old, 40 years old.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that, Joe?
It's been quite publicised around my thoughts around that sort of stuff. I back in 2017, maybe 16, something like that. I a little bit punchy, so my memory's not wonderful. But I was actually awarded the Australia Day Citizen of the Year in Wagga, and it was a beautiful night, and everybody in the auditorium stood up for the national anthem, but I firmly remained in my seat, as I had done for many years, and nobody was none the wiser. There's a few hundred people in the room. Nobody was none the wiser. The awards night went on. I was actually announced the winner. Got up, delivered a speech about a stirring speech and a call to action from community that we need to start to recognise a colonial past and the damages that it has done, not just 235 years ago, the ongoing traumatic impacts of that, and what we can do to try and build a better nation, moving forward. And I was actually I went to Sydney the following morning to actually celebrate, as I do every year down at Yarbin, the big event down in Sydney Park, and just at the park down at Broadway there, and my phone was running hot with messages and calls from all of the media back home, and nobody knew about it, right? Said that Joe didn't stand up for the anthem, and like it took away everything from the actual award and why I got the award. The reason I got the award was around the work that I'd done in communities around suicide and suicide prevention and mental health, and it was a really hot topic back then as it is now, and it just went viral. The fact that this guy was given an Australia Day award and didn't actually stand up for the anthem, and then I wrote a couple of articles, actually for NITV, like just explaining my stance around what it is. And you mentioned that the anthem itself isn't even 40 years old, or the fact that it's been stated as the anthem. In my lifetime, we sang "God Save the Queen." The original song is a 5-verse song about England. People don't actually know the facts of this stuff. And I started to talk about that, and then that's what people are like. And you have a look at, well, the people are like with that, don't bring sport and politics into it. But you have a look at, like, people bring politics into sport rather than, not mixing it that way. Because you have a look at, what happened with Adam Goods, what happened with Eddie Betts, what happened with all the, like all the media attention that happens with Latrell and the NRL around this sort of stuff. Like it seems that people get disgruntled when it's speaking about the common narrative that's been here for X amount of years since colonization of this country. So it's only when you start to challenge that narrative that people love Latrell. They love all the different players. Adam Goods, Eddie Betts, all these different players when they're kicking goals and doing anything, but they only seem to love those players when they be quiet and do what they're told. Right. So that's the challenge. That's the narrative we need to start having. The conversation we need to start having is why people get so uncomfortable around coloured people, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, the first people of this country that has been here for thousands and thousands of years, why you get so challenged when we don't do what you want us to do. right? It speaks directly to a colonial past around slavery and everything like that, you know. So we need to challenge those conversations and start to step back and push back about these things a little bit, you know, because that's the only way we like. You can't heal from a past that's extremely painful for one people, and when you just constantly ignore the damages that it does. So I say, good on those brothers, good on those sisters for for stepping up and doing what they truly feel, right? Because that's what it is. It's about what they truly feel. It isn't about trying to grab attention or anything like that. It's about what they truly feel. That what we talk about around our kitchen tables, what we talk about to our families and our friends, and what we truly feel. We're getting to a place now where we can truly stand in the comfort, truly stand in the truth of our people, and we be comfortable about it. For a long time, we weren't allowed to. For a long time, it wasn't comfortable because of the racial charged violence that we are abused with.
It's spot on. Actually reminds me, years ago when the Black Lives Matter situation started to inflame in America, and when the African American guy was murdered by the police and whatnot. And I remember when LeBron James, one of the most famous basketballers to ever play in the NBA, he started speaking about it. They were like, "Hey, just play basketball and shut up, stay in your lane." I remember that, and I was thinking to myself, they love him when he's winning rings and championships, and being an absolute freak. But then when
Colin Kaepernick, remember he started the.
Oh yeah, and Colin Kaepernick as well.
Colin Kaepernick did the exact same thing, and people say it's like, hey, listen, we pay you to get there and perform for us. We ain't circus monkeys, man. It's about doing what we feel as well.
Do you remember Nicky Winmar? I think we were kids at the time. AFL St Kilda. That was big.
That was massive.
But the media back then, the way they portrayed him was, this brash, outspoken Aboriginal's just gone a bit too far by pointing at his skin. I was a kid and old enough to remember that. And then in the rugby league sense, we had Anthony Mundine. I think they didn't like someone of colour that had a mouth on him, It was all right for everyone else to have a mouth, but it wasn't right for the coloured man to have a mouth, I actually like that he was confident.
It's the narrative that we see, and hear about all over the world. Thankfully, we're starting that. Like, we can have these conversations now, right? Like, there's platform for us to have these conversations, and people of color now have platforms and largely follow platforms around this sort of stuff. So, we're getting to a place as a country, and I think, universally and internationally, we're getting to a place where we're starting to challenge those old narratives that, it was about, you only speak when you're spoken to, boy.
Yeah, absolutely. Even if you look at the atrocities that are happening in Palestine, in Gaza, if it was for mainstream media, we would think that, the aggressor is the victim. The oppressor, the occupier, they're the victim. But because platforms are changing, then, the new generation of people are not willing to sort of accept the status quo or accept mainstream media. We're looking for alternative places to learn about what's going on in the world. We're able to see the truth, and it's quite astounding, even with the indigenous issues that the indigenous population of Australia continues to face day on day. Like, even in 2023, there were racist remarks towards Latrell. By some kid in Penrith. And this is a child. This kid would have learnt it from somewhere, and probably from his parents.
It's the environment he's been fostered in. So,
and I think the voice.
You made a really, really good point. You made a really good point about what we see and hear in the media. And Malcolm X said something perfect. And it was, if you're not careful, the newspapers will have you hating the people who are being oppressed and loving the people who are doing the oppressing. People are always judged based, and we make judgments not with our own intellect. We make judgments based on the narrative that we're fed through mainstream media, and it's evident. You just mentioned about the uprising around the world around what's happening in Gaza. to Palestinian people, indigenous people. The same story that happened here, the exact same story. So we just didn't have social media to document it 235 years ago, right? But we have social media to document the ongoing stuff now around deaths in custody, around child removal, around all of these different things that we see with racism that's portrayed in the narrative that is constantly fed down our throats.
You mentioned something there as well where you say, you guys didn't have social media 235 years ago. And it's interesting. A lot of people say, if we were back then, we wouldn't have allowed it. If we were back then, we would have fought for them. If we were back then. And then, people say, if we were around in the time of the Holocaust, we wouldn't have allowed it to happen. If we were around in the time of Rwanda, we wouldn't have allowed that genocide to happen. You're around now, right? You can speak up on behalf of the indigenous people. You could have voted for the indigenous voice. You could speak up for the people of Gaza. But I guarantee you that a lot of people that are turning a blind eye to Gaza probably voted no for the voice. And regardless of whether you think it was the right thing for the country or not, right? A lot of people say, you could have done this, you would have done this, you wouldn't have done that, but you're not doing it. That's the thing. A lot of people, they talk a lot, but when the opportunity comes, they're silent because it doesn't benefit them, or there's some risk to some sort of money they make, or it's inconvenient for them to talk. But the opportunity is there.
And like you said, man, it's if and when it was 2 centuries ago, it still happens. It still happens in wars around the world, right? So it's it's a challenging environment, but what we need to do is continue to just push out the truth, and the truth will always set us free. In what we do and how we do things, and that's the biggest thing. Like there's so many people in this country that just believe lies and propaganda, what's pushed down their throat. So, but it's we live to fight another day, and we will continue to uprise and continue to do our best and put our best foot forward every single day.
Spot on. I love your thoughts, and look, I think you've eloquated them perfectly. As you say, the indigenous struggle, the struggle for freedom, the struggle for self-determination is one struggle all over the world. I want to just pivot a little bit back to rugby league. I wanted to ask you some of the things around the NRL. The NRL has changed a lot over the last 10, 15 years since you've played. What are your thoughts on the NRL as it is today? Its speed, its aggression, it's absolutely incredible. I just want to sort of ask your thoughts on rugby league as a sport today.
Yeah, I think the athleticism and I guess the still brutality of it, because it's so much faster and these athletes are so much stronger. That's it's a key word of what I said there. Athletes, everyone is a professional athlete in what they do now. So they train 5 days a week, and they train 2 and 3 times a day. So the body type of these guys and then now with the NRLW and even the AFLW, the body type of these athletes is just incredible. I remember I went to a game. It was earlier in 23, because it was sorry, it must have been last year. It was a game last year because it was a 20-year reunion for our Jersey Flag side that won the comp.
Thanks for costing us that win, mate.
With the Roosters, right? I looked at we stood as a bit of a guard of honour for the first grade team that ran out, and I looked at these guys and I was just like, holy hell, they are massive. So the biggest difference is you get little me, who's like 4 foot nothing, playing up against you see halfbacks now, and I guess I'm the ex South Sydney halfback, and then you look at say the current South Sydney halfback, say Lockie Ilias, who was there this year. I looked at that kid and he's probably 6'1" and looks like he's 90 kilo. I was 170 centimeters and played at 80 kilo. So I was these kids are massive now, and they're just big athletes and fit and strong and professional athletes. So it's a great game to watch. I don't think that there's a hell of a lot of creativity in the game now. I'm also mindful that I don't want to be one of those old boys that bag the NRL that's angry about everything. You
I
know,
think
those
it's more
ones
like
that
just
always,
battering rams
ah,
now.
the game's not as tough as what it was when we were around.
You're not
Like
wrong.
I'm
It's more
not.
like battering ram tactics. He's right. Yeah.
It's like, you know what, I'll tell you what it is. I guess this is my assessment of it. Is that the top 8 teams are a better version of the bottom 8 teams.
Yeah. Just
That's the
who's
difference.
got bigger and better battering rams. That's how I
That's
see
the
it anyway.
difference, right? They all play the same. Every team plays exactly the same, and it's only fatigue and a missed tackle that has the difference between the teams. You look at the bottom teams. You could put a halfback in the bottom teams into some of the top teams because of the forward pack is different and the number of good quality players in that forward pack is different. That halfback's going to go a lot better. So I'll be interested to see how Luke Brooks goes this year over at Manly, right? Because there is potentially a top 8 forward pack, right, with a kid that played as a bottom 8 team and a bottom 8 forward pack. It'll be interesting to see the difference with that. And there's you only got you don't like my dad always says to me, and I always say to my kids, um, don't don't look at how the halfbacks go and look at how the forwards are going, right? And if your forwards are going backwards, there's every chance that the halfback's not playing any good, right? And then you have a look at the pressure that halfback comes under with the media, with everyone. Like everyone was, on the case of halfbacks in the bottom 4 teams, but they didn't speak about the forwards. When halfbacks rely on forwards to go forward to get the work done.
It's a great point that you make. You say there's a lack of creativity. Do you think that's a problem because of the rules and the way the game is developing, or is it because there's a halfback drain? Like we just don't it's taking too long to develop good young halfbacks into sort of world class halfbacks.
We don't develop good young halfbacks because the skills coached out of them at a young age. Like you go out to country footy, right? And there was so many good players coming through in the 90s and early 2000s from the bush, and like they are great, skillful, super athletic kids that can turn a game on its head just through pure skill. That it's all coached out of them now, because again the same systems come from down to the top. So if I'm going to send a kid, from here in Dubbo where I'm at that I'm coaching, that it's a super gifted, got great talent, great vision as a kid. If I send him down to a club, the club will coach that kid the same way they coach in their first grade. So, like all the systems are the same because the kids go through the programs, right? So the kids in the under 16s are being coached the exact same way that the kids in the first grade are being coached. And you have a look at, like, we're talking about expansion of the NRL. I'm not someone who advocates for expansion of the NRL because I don't believe now there's enough quality NRL standard players playing in the first grade now. And that's why you see teams like you get the teams that are at the bottom of the table are pushing kids into first grade that aren't ready, and they're getting their opportunities in first grade well before their time because there's just not enough. I believe there's just not enough talent out there.
Yeah, I agree. Like Canterbury in this year, because of obviously the lack of a good top 30, we had to debut something like 10 or 11 youngsters, many of them probably a couple of years too early. Like, first one that comes to mind, for example, is Carl Oluwapu, who the Bulldogs bought from Brisbane. He's 18. He's got neck issues and maybe out for the next year with because of a neck surgery. Like, for me, that's a symptom of being debuted too early, but we had no players. Then you look at, we also debuted someone like Khalid Rajab, who maybe debuted a year too early. So, like, I do agree with you. But I'm also of the opinion that I don't think the game can stagnate. I think that things need to happen simultaneously. Like, I'm a strong advocate that there needs, now that there's a 17th, there needs to be an 18th team, but it can't be in Brisbane or in Queensland or New South Wales. It needs to be in Perth, and there needs to be proper investment in grassroots development of players to come from Perth, not just, hey, let's go grab whatever talent we have in Sydney or Brisbane and move that across.
Do you know what I think? Do you know where I think the standard of the game went? And these, again, like, I'm no expert with this sort of stuff. I'm just someone who played a little bit and who loves looking at the game and actually went away from the game for a long time and didn't even watch football, to now actually being back involved in coaching and enjoying working with young kids. I'll tell you where, in my opinion, where the game went. I feel that the standard of play dropped was when we cut the national reserve grade competition.
Oh, absolutely, spot on.
Like the fact that we've got kids that are 20-year-old going into first grade, and if they're not in the under 20s or if they're not in the top 30, right, then they're playing park footy on zero cash. Then like there's no investment in that. I believe we should have an under 23s competition.
Do you remember
right?
that?
Because then that way, right, if you got an under 23s, if you got an under 23s, or even then the reserve grade competition, right, and then put investment into that, then you're not having kids going from 20-year-old where developmentally they're just not ready yet to go and playing the rigor of NRL footy week in, week out, where like I played 49 games, right? And I still don't think that I had the full rigor of what it takes to be an NRL player week in, week out, mentally and developmentally, from a physical standpoint, but then even more so from a mental standpoint. It just takes so much for these kids to get up week in, week out, right? And then we are critical of them when they don't perform well every single week. Like developmentally, I'm talking about brain-wise here, developmentally, they just don't have the mental capacity to be able to do that.
How tough was it going to... I know South had spent a few years out of the comp, and then they came back in, and they were cellar dwellers for a while. But how tough was it joining a club in a total rebuild phase? They hadn't played finals. I think you ended up playing finals with them.
Yeah, one game.
I think so. Did he play? Did
Yeah,
you play it?
Yeah, one finals.
But you know, when you... I mean, but how tough was it? They hadn't played finals for, I think, almost 2 decades. They didn't play finals in the 90s. I remember that clearly. And then, I think under JT, you guys made the finals, but you would have been thrown in the deep end through such a rebuilding phase. I think you went through Craig Coleman, Langmack, Sean McRae, JT. I might have missed another coach in there, but, I mean, how tough was that, basically? It would have been... Every coach
I had in all of my career got sacked.
Yeah, that's just so tough on them and tough on you guys.
But then look, like it's super tough. And you look at what the rebuild phase there, like you were just talking about, and I tell you what it was like. Well, remember when and this was a big conversation at the time, but remember when Russell and Peter Holmes Court took over the club? Russell Crowe and Peter Holmes Court, right, in 07 at the end of 06. It literally went from night and day with that club overnight. Like I remember times when we were training at Redfern Oval, and then we were training full time at Erskineville Oval when Redfern was being redeveloped. And literally that off season went from I think they laser leveled the field, so we had, and then decked the gym out with actual machinery that you can record data and things like that. Like we went from a place that just had a few weights and things like that to.
I remember. I remember Redfern Oval playing some few junior rep footy games there, mate. I think seats were missing from the grandstand. The hinges were off the doors in the dressing rooms, and it was just ridiculous. Like normal like park, toilets were better off than Redfern Oval. Like, it was so bad. But then, like you said, when Rusty and Peter Holmes Court came in, they literally, it was overnight. They went from a club running off raffles to probably one of the glamour clubs of the NRL. They are one of the glamour clubs of the NRL.
Yeah, and you look at it now,
Well,
they won the grand
actually,
final
I
and they've
say
been on
this
the
with
rise.
respect. I say this with respect to the staff that were there, because I still talk to some of the staff that were there. I have immense respect with them, with the resources that they had at the time. But we went from a semi-professional outfit to a professional outfit overnight. You know, as far as the resources for training, equipment, things like that. And then, that's when in 07, things started to turn around. I think it was the first time in 20 odd years that we made the semi-finals and so forth like that. So it was good times. There was you're looking back at sliding doors moments in your careers. In 07, there was a conversation that was being had. It was like we're gonna skim the top off some of the players' contracts, so we can then reduce those playing contracts, so we can then be able to get have the money spare to get a marquee player, right? And I was offered one of those contracts, and it was a two-year extension, and it was actually on less than I was on. In conversations with those close to me, I won't name names or anything like that, but it was conversations with people who that I trusted at the time. Said, "No, Joe, let's hold off and let's push him and let's get a bit more money." And then I was dropped to reserve grade that next week. It's hard to get a decent contract when you're playing in reserve grade. Thankfully, I fought my way back into the team. I made the we made the semi-finals and stuff like that. But that next year I signed with Penrith for it was close to half of what I was on the year before. So sliding doors moments where I was offered an extra 2 years at South, and some people that were advising me at the time said, "No, you're on more than that. We'll get more out of him." And then bang, I was back in reserve grade, within a couple of weeks.
Jeez. So you ended up at the Bulldogs after that, and you played 2 games.
Was he there during? Were you there when Sonny was still there, or he had departed?
Let me tell you this, right? It was like a funeral.
Oh,
right?
Jeez.
Like I came there, right? I think I signed on like the Thursday, right? I signed the deal to come from Penrith on like the Thursday. Right, the sign goes through, clearance goes through, all that sort of stuff. And then Bulldogs were playing the Gold Coast on the Friday, right? So I get a call at ridiculous hours. Joe, you're 18th man. You got to get to the airport. You're coming up because one of the players is crook, right? So I was like, holy smokes! I'd literally signed 24 hours before. I went up there and I trained. I did the last ball work session, captain's run, all that sort of stuff with the first grade team. But then the player was Aaron Groom. He actually was okay and actually played. Yeah, like he had something wrong. I think it was a stomach issue or something like that. And then he actually played, and that would have been my chance to play on the edge with Sonny. And then Sonny left that weekend.
Wow.
Yeah.
He literally left that weekend, man.
I think you guys were 2 points outside the 8 when he left, and then ended up getting the spoon after that.
Yeah, we got the spoon that year. But I mean, it was the whole NRL was just in absolute shock after he left. Like that was probably one of the biggest moments in NRL history. Where Sonny Bill just upped and left.
I wasn't in shock.
Yeah, maybe not you, but as a Bulldog supporter, I was in shock. I was heartbroken. It was just so many things that.
Mate, I remember it, and like I'm literally driving to training and all this stuff on the radio, and I'm going, like, surely he was with us like 48 hours ago.
Oh my god! It came out on a Saturday.
Then, like we go to training like the Monday or the Tuesday or whatever it was, and like we're just like. And bear in mind, I didn't know a lot of these boys because I only got there,
You would have loved to have played with him.
72 hours prior.
Jeez, at the peak of his powers.
So, what was it like at the club? Like, how were the admin staff and the coaches and stuff sort of handling it when Sonny had left? How did they communicate this stuff to you guys as players?
It was very hush hush. I actually don't recall. I actually don't recall the conversation. As I said, I'm a little bit punchy, but I actually don't recall the conversation that was had. With the playing group. I may not have even been in the top squad as far as the training goes. You know what I mean? So it was one of those things where it just all happened so fast, and then we were reading about it more so on online and listening to it on the radio and stuff like that. For that, so it was just a real weird moment. And then it was a challenge. As you said, I only played 2 games that year, which was it was disappointing because I wanted to go over and back myself and things like that, and it just I will say that I was that I'd had enough by that season, and it was when. That's when I started to go. Hey, that's when I started to do a little bit of work with Johnny Lewis. I'd done some work with Johnny previously, the previous season when I was at South, and he actually because he was an old Newtown man, but he had some connections, with the dogs and stuff like that. So he was actually having some conversations around that as well, and he's around, Joe, should you go? Should you not go? So it was one of those sort of, I guess, really weird times. And that's when at the end of that season, towards the end of the season, I was like, I'm going to start dropping some weight because you can't box it where I was boxing, where I was playing. And that's when, after the season, I was like, I'm going to have a fight, Johnny. It was like, firstly I was training with Johnny and stuff like that, and he said, "Would you have a fight?" And I was like, "Oh well, I don't know. I wasn't the world's most aggressive man, so I didn't. I'd always loved boxing, but I'd love the art form of boxing, but I'd never been punched in the mouth. You ask yourself some questions when that happens. So it was a pretty cool transition, and literally, we. I think we finished in late August. We didn't make the semi-finals. Late August, and I had my first fight in October. I finished it. I finished playing in the NRL at 82 kilos, and I had my first fight at 79 kilo. 69 kilo. Sorry.
Wow. Oh, it was a super welterweight, maybe super welterweight.
I fought at junior middle my first fight.
Junior middleweight. Yeah.
So what was your defining rugby league moment? Like, what is the one moment in rugby league that you look back to and stands out for you?
The one game, like when the kids say, "Dad, put a game on," is it's probably the game that I had when I played against the Tigers at Leichhardt. No, Dylan wasn't with us then, he was a bit younger. He was a bit younger as well. But we needed to win that game. Whoever won that game made the semis, more or less. And we needed to win that game to make the semis. And I literally remember it, right, is that we were coming, and you've been to Leichhardt? So I remember, have you been to Leichhardt?
I've played there as well. Yeah, it's just the worst ground ever to go to and play.
That street, right? That street, you come up to really narrow, right? So we're in this bus. We're in this bus that can hardly fit up that narrow street because there's cars parked and stuff like that on the side, right? We're in this bus, and there are people, because you got to remember, if South won, we made the semi-finals, and we'd won 2 or 3 in a row or something like that. Right, we won 2 or 3 in a row, and then we were scratching on the 8. And if we won, it cemented our spot with 1 game to go into the semi-finals. So literally, the game sold out on Thursday. Right, it was a Sunday afternoon game. The game sold out on a Wednesday or Thursday or something. We were going up that narrow street in the bus, and there were people lined up, mate, up the street, and I was just looking out the window, going, "Holy shit! Like, this is real," right? go into the gate, all that sort of stuff, get into the ground, and like go on there. And I remember the game. Nath Merritt busted his knee in like the opening few minutes, and they put Tuli Talanoa back to fullback. I remember going in at half time, and Mark Ellison, who now works at South in the footy department, Ello was one of our assistants. And I said to Ello, I said, mate, I just can't get into the game. And he goes, what do you mean? And I said, I can't get into the game. It's like it's going past me. Like I don't feel like I'm getting the ball or getting the calls or anything like that. And he goes, Joe, just have patience. It's all right. Trust the process. Have patience. And it was one of those things, man. Like in the second half, it was like I had spiders on me. Like that. I was making breaks and setting up tries, but then I look back at that. I remember the conversation I had with Mark Ellison, and I look back at that game, and like it was one of those games where from the opening bounce, like things worked. Like not often you have those games, and I think I put Dino Witters through on the, and I only remember this because me young bloke wanted to put it on recently, because he found it on YouTube. But I put Dino Witters down the left hand edge, and there was, and I think I threw the last pass for Johnny Sutton's try in the first half. So going into half time, I can't get into the game. That's why Ella was like, "What are you talking about, man? Like you're in the game." It was just, I guess it's odd to reflect on things like that as well, but it's pretty like those days are long gone for me. It's not who I am now, but it's pretty cool to be able to just show my kids that sort of stuff because social media wasn't like it is now, and you can't just track those sort of things down. So the fact that my kids love it is enough for for me.
Are they keen to play footy like following their dad's footsteps?
That's the thing. I don't want them to, right? I want them like I was a halfback, and I didn't get tackled a lot, and I didn't make a lot of tackles, but it struggles me to walk these days. So I can only imagine how blokes feel after 10 years of playing in the front row or something like that. And plus, all the different challenges with the conversations that we have around head knocks and concussions and all that sort of stuff now. And, so I understand that the game's very different now, but also the players that you hit are a hell of a lot stronger and they run a hell of a lot faster and harder. So, it's cool to watch. It's cool to watch, but I can also talk to my kids about the other things in life, the other things that it's great to have those sort of things, but without a doubt, mate, the work that I do now is far more important than I say this with respect as well. Is far more important than throwing a footy around and getting punched in the head for a living.
So tell us a little bit about what you do now, Joe.
I struggled mentally and emotionally, more so mentally a fair bit, throughout my life, and it's well documented. And we don't need to go into that now. But I struggled with some suicidal ideation a large part of my life. Had challenges with addiction, with the alcohol and drugs and things like that. And I guess I got sober when I was still at South actually. So I've been sober 18 years this year, and it was like I was using alcohol and drugs to silence what was going on inside my head. I'd take away the alcohol and drugs. It was like the Band-Aid, ripping the Band-Aid off the sore. The noise got louder than ever. So it was some challenges with that, and challenges around some, I guess, putting it bluntly, and I know that you'll put trigger warnings at the front of the show and stuff like that, but I shouldn't be sitting here talking to you. I had some really challenging times and experiences back in 2012 that I shouldn't be around to tell the story.
But we're glad you are.
I had a couple of different psych ward stays and things like that, and it's been a journey of understanding and healing, and it's I'm well on the path to doing that now. And I realized that once I started to talk about this stuff, and a hell of a lot of people come up to me saying, "Hey Joe, what you talk about, I go through the same experiences." When you talk about it and you normalize what it is that you go through, it makes me feel like I'm not as mad as they tell me. So like the early days of talking about things like that, and then going to university and understanding and learning about trauma and how trauma impacts people, and looking at diving deep into the ongoing traumatic cycles that we're accustomed to with the way that we live, and like as far as not spending enough time with our kids, and because of cost of living, and the pressures of how much we're going to live, how much it costs to live, and then the demand on work hours and things like that. So understanding that, like, I went a lot of, like, I've been in hundreds of communities around the country speaking about mental health, and helping people understand the challenges that they go through, to then learning deeper about trauma and understanding what trauma is, to then helping people rebuild a life from different traumatic experiences that they've been through, to I'm now the founder of a youth academy that it's a charity that works with young people to help with their identity, and find out who they are and connect to their roots of who they are. So an Indigenous academy that we talk about culture and identity and the values of how we live and behave, and how it impacts others. So the work that I do now is far more important with that, because it's about helping other people. It's about helping people to be better people, essentially. And I coach young kids out here in Dubbo, and I really enjoy that. I'm also part of the coaching staff of the New South Wales Aboriginal Under-16s team, which again, it's about giving back, and there's some fantastic people in that crew with Dean Witters and Arthur Beatson's sons, Mark and Christian, and some other guys that are in that those coaching staffs that just put back and help young Aboriginal kids to. It's not about footy. It's also about whilst we play and we help educate them about playing. It's also about life and the challenges that we have in life and the choices that we can make that impact those challenges.
That's amazing. And we'll have links to all those the charities and different organizations that Joe works with down below in the description. So please, if you are struggling with anything or you need help, we'll have some links down below for people to check out. You mentioned mental health quite a bit, and thank you so much for sharing your story and for being so honest with us. I think that mental health is something that you can't stop talking about. I wanted to ask you something that happened earlier in the Bulldogs team around mental health, and there was around a training incident where someone was punished for being late to training, and there were complaints about training being a little bit too physical, little bit too tough. A lot of ex-players came out and said, look, if you can't handle the training, you're not good enough to be a first-grade player. If you're complaining about the punishments, people have copped worse and have, been better for it. I'm interested to hear what your thoughts are on that whole training scenario and that whole training incident that happened with the Bulldogs earlier in the year.
What I will say is that I don't know it. I don't know. Like, obviously, you hear the noise about it, and you read the different articles and stuff like that. But we play a professional game, and I put my hand up, and the trainers of the teams that I with, or even the teammates of the teams that I played with, I put my hands up to say that I wasn't the world's best trainer when I was a footy player. When I went to boxing, I learned how to train hard, because if you don't train hard as a boxer, you get beat, and I didn't want to get beat. So what I guess what the biggest thing is, or the biggest takeout that I could have from that is that Cameron Serrato's come in and he's put some standards there. And if these people or these players aren't abiding to those standards, again, saying these sort of things without understanding the actual situation, but if the coaching staff have standards and the players have standards, and everyone's got to hold each other accountable to those standards. So again, not knowing a great deal about the situation, but we play a hard sport. We play a hard sport that takes a hell of a lot of hard work to do. As far as I don't know how mental health and well-being came into that. What I do and will say is that we need to be more aware of the impacts of external factors of our life that impact us whilst we're at training, right? Because I do recall times for myself personally and players around me, if they've had a shit day at home, then they're going to come and perform shit house. So what we need to do as coaches, and it's one of the best things that I think I spoke about it on a podcast recently as well, is that why I love coaching so much is because I identify the kids' behaviors long before that they even walk in the door. I can tell. I can just smell it on them. I can see the way that they walk, the way that their shoulders are drooped, the way that they say hello, if they smile, if they don't smile. I can tell there's some stuff going on inside their head the minute they walk through the door. So I'm not going to absolutely smash and bash and demand that kid to be at his absolute best when I can see physically that he's being impacted mentally and emotionally, right? What I will say is that we have standards, and I'll pull that player aside and say, listen, is everything okay? What's going on? Let's have a yarn about that. And then, and try and coach that young person through those tough challenges. So what I think we need to be more aware of is what young people are bringing into the training park, and this could bring up some controversy as well, because you leave that at home and don't bring it, but there's some stuff that you can't help. Like there's stuff that we all go through, marriage breakdowns, loss and breakup of families. Like this stuff impacts you every day and is going to impact the way that you perform. So I think, if we can have more of a relationship with our players and understand that we have responsibilities and we have standards inside the four walls of a footy club or inside the four walls of a team, if we hold each other to those standards, but if we have some reasonable challenges that are going on in our life, let's start to get around each other so we can help each other get through those tough times so we can be then performing at our best.
I think it's spot on. I want to thank you so much for taking the time. I'm going to end with two questions that I think you might like. Firstly, how do you think the Rabbitohs are going to go in 2024?
With Jack White in there, they've certainly bought well. And again, like people have been critical of Lockie Ilias, but I think Lockie Ilias, as a halfback, and someone who was a player of that team, I think Lockie Ilias was forced into first grade 12 to 18 months before he should have been, because they were banking on Reynolds being there a little bit longer, right? So there's probably a little bit of pressure on Lockie Ilias to now perform. Like as I've mentioned, you probably don't become a really seasoned player until 40, 50 games in. Right, so to be able to run a team and physically manage the team and have the experience of doing that, he's been there for a couple of years now, so the pressure is going to be on. But also having someone like Jack there, again, another State of Origin player, another international player, is only going to add some punch wherever he plays, whether he plays in the centres or plays at I don't know where he might play. He might play at lock. Someone like me, I'd play him in the back row, because he's someone who's an extra six. You can throw him the ball early, and then he can play on the edge. With his centre at the line or Latrell sweeping around the back. It's exciting. I'm just excited to see some of those young kids as well develop. The young lock. Is it Duncan?
Yeah.
That debut this year. I like the look of him.
Yeah.
I like the look of him. Yeah, it'd be interesting, like and mate, Cody just seems to get better with age. It's those experience things, and like he's got all the time in the world, Cody. It'll be interesting what they do. I'm looking forward to it. I think they bought well, so it'll be interesting how they go. I tell you what though, what I will say, and I don't know. No, let me say this after your next question. Let's go to the next question.
My next question is, how do you think the Bulldogs are going to go with some of the signings that they've made in 2024, and will they improve?
Wooden spoon.
That's exactly why I said let's go after this question, because I knew that being a Bulldogs man, you would have ended with the Bulldogs question. So here's the thing, right? Is that if I've got any kid that shows ability that comes up to me and says, Joe, I've got XY clubs chasing me, who do you think I should go to? 9 times out of 10, I say go to the Bulldogs, right? Because have a look what I believe this is, and this might cause a bit of controversy as well. But I believe what the and I've been saying this to you guys know that I'm very close with the Hussein brothers, who are my boxing coaches, and I boxed with those guys for a lot of years, and they're absolutely staunch Bulldogs people. And I said, have some patience, it's turning. And they go, what do you mean it's turning? It's hard. It's a hard road, Joe. When you go to every week,
as a doggy supporter.
Hard road. And I'm like, the success of Penrith now was built by Gus 10 years ago.
No, agreed.
Right?
100%.
So you have a look at what Penrith are doing now. I believe Gus is doing that at the Bulldogs now. And, people might say that I favour Gus a fair bit, but what I will say is that with Arthur Beetson, Gus was the one who signed me as a 13-year-old kid. Right? So I've had a good relationship with Gus for a lot of years.
Yeah.
Right? But I believe he's the smartest man in rugby league. So with that being said, I think that they are building beautifully. You've only got to look at the under 16s, 18s, 20s competitions. I think they're 16s, or are they 17s, 19s, 21s now? You've only got to look at those competitions. Where did the Bulldogs finish in those competitions?
Oh, yeah, right at the top.
One SG ball. We're leading New South Wales Cup for a good period of time. And, they've bought a lot. They've recruited a lot.
He's won Fleeg as well.
Yeah, that's right. And Harold Matt. So, no, you're right. It is building nicely, 100%.
So I said to the Hussein boys, just have some patience. The problem with football fans is that they want success now.
Yeah, no patience.
Right? And so every single kid that I have come to me and say, Joe, where should I go to? I've had kids that come to me and say, Joe, I'm getting offered more money to go here. I say, don't worry about the money. You're going to make that up later. Go somewhere where developmentally you're going to be looked after. They've just signed probably the hottest coach on the market in Cameron Serralo, right? He ain't going anywhere for a number of years, and he's going to have the place humming the way he wants to, which is, again, he's learnt off a very good system out there at Penrith.
And, well, the best ever system, really, if you think about how successful they've been.
So you have a look at that. I say that the Rabbitohs are my favourite team, closely followed by the Bulldogs at the moment. And they haven't been that, I will say as well. Right? But obviously because I'm close with the Fox and I still get along with Gus really well, I talk to any one young kid, and the two clubs I say to go to, I say, obviously speak to the Bulldogs, but then I say go to the Rabbits.
Well, that brings a big smile to my face, man, because always any support for the Doggies is a big tick in my books.
Joe, growing up, which Indigenous players did you look up to? Like, who are your favourites? Or
it's pretty cool. I was asked this recently. They said, who was your favourite player growing up? I actually got to play against my favourite player growing up in the NRL. Right? My favourite player growing up, who took me under my wing a little bit when I was coming through at the Roosters, and then I played against him when he was at Manly, was Andrew Walker.
Wow, what a star!
So,
he was a star.
Yeah, so I like him to watch was just like poetry in motion, man. So smooth. And you know, you look at what he did athletically on the training park, and then as a dual international, Australian Rugby League, Australian Rugby Union. I was just I've got a friendship with Unc now, and he's a champion guy that I think still playing in the bloody Koori Knockouts now. So he's just one of those. He was one of those guys that I just looked up and thought was a brilliant player, and I was lucky I got to play against him.
You know, I remember at St. George, Walker was there, Andrew was there before we went to the Roosters. So you had him, you had Mundine, you had Ricky Walford, you had Jeff Hardy. Blacklock came towards the end. But I think St. George at one stage had 5 or 6 Indigenous brothers in there. And, I just thought we were the most Indigenous club back in the 90s. But
that's why they had Koori Corner out at Cogra, remember that?
Yeah, it was a little mini grandstand or something. And you see Anthony's dad out the front, and he just had, it was about, you just have all the oldies that would sit in it from the Indigenous community, So,
and also in the change room as well, the brothers used to get together. So
I saw about a little mini grandstand they made or something.
It was actually where I first started watching Andrew Walker was when he was at the Dragon.
Wow.
Yeah, he had a big boot on him.
And you know what? The other guy who I used to absolutely love going, and it just come back to me now, was Scott Goulet. I used to love watching Scott Goulet. Remember Scott Goulet, the big lock? Big tall lock he was. He played at St. George and he played at the Roosters as well. And I was lucky. Signed at the Roosters as a kid. They used to bring me down a fair bit. So I was lucky I got to mix with these guys.
He was another dual international.
Yeah. So lucky that I got to play with and against some of my favourite players. My first grade trial, I was playing inside Brad Fittler, which was a bit of a story for that. Halfback tells you what to do on the field, right? So I'm getting out there, and I'm only a young kid, and I'm shooting orders around and stuff like that. And Freddie goes, "All right, we're going right," and I'm like, "No, we're going left." And then I was like, "Holy shit! I just went against what Brad Fittler said."
How did he react?
I had this freeze moment and looked at him, and he goes, "You heard Joey, we're going left."
Oh yeah,
wow,
good old Freddie.
That's awesome.
Freddie the motivator.
Joe, I just want to thank you so much for taking the time this evening. It's been such a mad discussion to have with you, just about all things rugby league, life, topics. Is there anything you'd like to close off with? Anything you'd like to say before we end the chat?
Man, I will say that obviously the work that I do now, I value highly as far as the work that I do in schools and the new academy that I've just founded. It all comes back to what we do with our young people from young ages. Right now, the way that we live is just not conducive to how we should be developing and growing as healthy and happy human beings. We're spending less time with our kids than we ever have. We're eating the unhealthiest we've ever eaten. We move less than we've ever moved. And we're more disconnected than we've ever been. So what we need to do as a race, as a people, we need to come back to our village. We need to build our village again, and grow our kids up in happy, healthy homes where they are loved and valued. Because the challenge that we're having now, with a lot of the work that I do with the kids around the country, is that we have broken little kids in the bodies of adults. And those broken adults are then raising broken little kids. So what we need to do is start to do the work on ourselves and start to identify the challenges that we have and sit with the discomfort and understand why we are the way we are, and understand that, and then start to do the work on ourselves. Because I believe that human beings are one of love, and what we need to do is start to build our village to be able to connect with each other, so we can live happier and healthier and longer.
Thank you so much. And again, I'll provide all the links to Joe's Academy and all the charity work that he does down below. So please have a look at it. Thank you once again, Joe, for coming. I think, the discussion was awesome, and we'd love to have you on again anytime that you're free or you have some time. We'd love to have you back on there again. Thank you so much for the chat, and we look forward to speaking to you again.
Thanks, brothers. You take it easy.
Pleasure.
And
Thanks.
go the Rabbits.
Go the Dogs.
Go the Eagles.
Go the Dogs. Free Palestine.
We'll
Thanks,
see you
Joe.
again soon.
See you, lads.